Right, good evening everybody. Welcome to the Scrutiny Budgeting Performance Panel. First of all, apologies for absence. I believe we don't have any. We're all here and Councillor Coulton is dialing in from home. So do we have any declarations of interest? No, in which case if we can move on to the minutes of the last panel meeting on Monday the 13th of September. Could somebody move those please? Thank you. Seconded. All agreed? Yep. That then takes us to item 4, matters arising from previous scrutiny budget and performance panel meetings. If I could perhaps start off on page 9, where we have an outstanding recommendation going back to March, where the recommendation was for the costs associated with refurbishing Pemberton Leisure Centre. We asked for information on that. However, we don't seem to have a clear outlined response. Given that the joint use agreement has now come to an end, the school are running part of, well, quite a lot of the leisure facilities, and we're running some of the others. We do wonder whether we could have a breakdown as to what was the money spent on, and how is it divided up between Circle, the school and the council. So if we could perhaps seek that information.
Yeah, I don't know why that's not been provided, David, but I'll make sure that that happens.
So, Karen.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is on the same page, page 10, minute 46.6, when we've asked for further examples of outcomes from the community helps to be included in future reports. There is a report on page 18, but we feel that it's not really in-depth enough, and we would like to have more of a deep dive in the next quarter's report, measuring some success and outcomes of all the community hubs, not just 1 or 2 examples, if that's possible, please.
Yeah, my understanding, Chair, is that there will be a review done fairly shortly. So I imagine that that information will flow from that review, and it will probably make sense for scrutiny to wait until the outcome of that review.
Okay. Will?
Thank you, Chair. Something that we touched on, I think, a few times, particularly within this group, just looking at customer service response times, and obviously the feedback we got last time that the performance was generally good. So we're on page 11 here as well, but this kind of appears to be contrary to the feedback and experience from members that this is not the case. I was just wondering, how are we measuring success for this? Thank you. Sorry, it's page 11, second from the bottom, minute 46.9.
I can't find it, Will. It doesn't really matter. I can answer the point. So because this has been picked up in the Shared Service Joint Committee, where there's been a review of customer services. So the next phase of shared services was to look at ICT and customer services, and there was a presentation to the committee last week to set out a new business model for customer services. Quite a robust discussion, and the committee wanted some further information, and in fact in relation to the performance of the contact centre and answering calls. So and because there was quite a difference between Chorley and South Ribble, but we're focusing on South Ribble here. So what we has emerged from that piece is that, and I think we knew this anyway, but not all calls are measured at the moment. So only the calls that go into the customer contact centre are measured. So any that go to direct dial are not measured. And that'll be one of the changes to the business models that we introduce, where all calls are routed through numbers so we can measure performance right across the organisation. But based upon the latest information we've got to hand, the abandonment rate at South Ribble is approximately 10%. And you know, you can judge that in a number of ways. You can say that's good, bad, or indifferent. It depends what it meets the target, but is that something that members are happy with? in terms of that rate. And that again is something we'll have to debate, because that will mean that we'll, as well as changing the business model, we're going to have to look at resourcing, and we've actually done that in the review. And the way that the model works at the minute is that calls are routed through essentially the contact centre. In the new model, and I can't remember the exact numbers, Vicky might be able to help me here, but I can't remember the exact numbers, but it's 10 or 11 staff on the contact centre, something like that. Might be 12. And the new model works on the basis that actually all those involved in any form of customer contact, whether that's somebody in the front office or the back office, calls will get routed to them. So that means that there's more people to distribute the calls to, based upon certain specialisms. So not everybody can answer every call, but in total numbers, that will mean that we move from a number of people answering a call on any one day from 10, something like 64. Again, I'm testing my memory here. I think 64. So we think that new model of working will improve customer contact times. But only with time will tell. So we'll implement the model, and then obviously we'll have to test it. What the committee asked for was a set of measures. And I think we've done that piece now, and obviously they'll have a discussion about what that target should be.
Okay, thank you. That then takes us on to item 5, which is the Corporate Strategy Quarterly Performance Monitoring Report, Quarter 2, 2021-22. Councillor Foster, unfortunately, can't be with us this evening. He has had a family bereavement, and he's been at a funeral today, so our thoughts do go out to him. But we have got the Chief Executive, Gary Hall, and we have got Vicky Willits with us. So if I could ask the first question. In general, the report is positive on corporate strategy projects, either being blue, complete, or green and on track. What processes are in place to ensure the data is valid and we don't get to quarter 3 and 4 and start to see potential issues?
Okay, good job. We've got a data quality expert right to my right, so I'm going to let her answer this one.
So in terms of the framework for managing performance, we have agreed a shared framework a number of months ago. It was actually last October, I think, that sets out our approach to measuring and monitoring performance. And as part of that, we have a number of checks and balances in place that we undertake each quarter. So through that system, each performance indicator that you see within this report is checked a number of times. Firstly, it's the way that the data is collected. Is that correct? And then somebody else will check that process that's been undertaken, whether it's internal data or whether it's collected from a third party. And then a senior officer, potentially a director or a manager, will sign off that data as being correct. It then comes through to the performance team, who undertake a final validation and check. So that's the process for performance data, and it's all entered into a single system now. So we do have a lot of of checks and balances in place to make sure that that data is accurate. We're also regularly audited as well by our internal auditors on that. From a project point of view, we have a project officer who works with project managers across the council, and he will undertake regular monitoring meetings with them to look at project performance, and we check back each quarter against the original project mandate and the project plan. So when we start a project, we write what the plan should be and how we'll deliver it. That process does change as we go through the delivery process, and we'll then complete exception reports, which mean if something's changed and we need to change the original scope, we'll then go back and ask the senior management team for permission to do that. So we do have that process in place, and the project officer will kind of follow that through and make sure that as we're going through the process of delivering the project, we're constantly doing that review and check and making sure that we're keeping things to time and budget, as well as looking at resources and capacity to deliver projects as well. So at this point in the year, I'm fairly confident in what's being reported as being accurate. We would expect that amount of projects to be completed at this point in the year from that perspective. And we do anticipate that the projects are all going to follow the plan and be delivered as expected within the timescales that were set out originally. So there are a number of checks and balances in place as part of our framework. We have a number of other mechanisms that Gary's reminded me about, including the senior management team form the main project board. We also have officer-led projects and performance networks that are internal mechanisms for doing checks and spot checks on performance and different aspects of project management. And then individual projects may indeed have their own project management boards as well, depending on the scale. So if it's a particularly big project, you would have a project team and a project board set up to deliver that piece of work. Some of the smaller projects may just be a single project manager working with the resources in the team. So yeah, there's a whole range of different tools and processes in place, and hopefully that gives us the reassurance that we're exactly where we need to be in terms of delivery.
Okay, thank you. I'm bringing Councillor Coulton.
Thank you, Chair. On page 16, there's delivery year 1 of the joint digital strategy. At the last meeting, we were told that most of the positions were filled, but yet now we're being told in the report that people are still being recruited into posts as late as December. What are the reasons for this delay, and what are the implications of the delay on the project and the delivery of IT services? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So in terms of the joint digital strategy, the reason in the report given is around the resourcing within that team. And we've obviously been undertaking an extensive review of the ICT team to make sure that we've got the right capacity and resources in place to deliver the strategy. So that process has been completed, and we're now at the point of being able to give the outcomes of the consultation process to staff, and we'll be then looking to start to appoint into those posts. As part of that, we're looking at the wider resourcing needs as well of the service to make sure that all aspects of the digital strategy can be brought back on track. Delivery hasn't stopped, it has continued, but it has been more limited due to needing to get those skills in place. So there are examples of the work that's been delivered within the report, such as the work with the planning services to align systems, the training around SharePoint as a new cloud-based storage system so that we can better share information and documents collectively. And all those improvements are fairly significant, sizable pieces of work that mean change right across the organisation in the way that we work. So the IT service have been doing that as well as other work to improve our IT infrastructure, which happens a lot in the background, I suppose, and we don't often see the outputs of that as users, but that's all about making our infrastructure more robust, making sure that we're not susceptible to any viruses or hackers. Lots of work with things called penetration tests, which look at what's coming onto our network and how we can make sure that it's all secure. And we don't often see that at the front, but all that work has been going on in the background throughout this process. The point we're at now with getting the right staff into post means that we should be able to get the expertise in and be able to really push forward on the wider priorities within the digital strategy. So I would give some reassurance and say that we have been moving forward on the priorities and the things that will have the most significant organisational impacts and addressing any critical risks. But we'll now be able to kind of address the wider aspects of the digital strategy as well. And we will need to do a process of review to make sure that we're kind of getting back on top of everything within that strategy. See, Gary's got his finger on the button, so I'll let you come in.
Yeah, one of the biggest elements of the digital strategy really was to upgrade the infrastructure, the council's infrastructure, because that's quite dated now. So work hasn't stopped on that. We are meeting some challenges because as a result of the kind of global slowdown, Brexit, access to computer chips, etc., the procuring of the kit we need has proved quite challenging. That said, we are almost there with it, and the intention is that shortly after Christmas, that work will start. So it's a little bit behind. We've had some challenges with it. The big pieces we're on with and making progress on, and the resourcing required to make sure that we can deliver that and sustain the new networks. They're in place. In fact, that's concluded today, I think, most of that. So, yeah. So we are making progress, but we would have liked to do it quicker, but there have been some challenges, that's for sure.
Can I come in again?
Yeah, Colin.
There are some anecdotal evidence about IT issues affecting staff and our residents, such as the weekly planning list. So have you heard of any issues that have affected our staff and residents?
Hi, Colin. Yeah. So what we do is we have a list of issues, and we have a plan to resolve those. They are test checked quite frequently by me, just to make sure, and others, just to make sure that we're making progress on them. Some of the issues are around the fact that actually, until we get the new infrastructure in place, some of the issues can't be fixed. So some of the technology that we have at the council is not supported because it's so old. And we need to make sure that those things are fixed. Some of the issues in relation to some of the staff have been around some of the new technology that we've implemented. So we have had some issues with new technology around the document management system. That was a new system that we implemented. But again, they are what I would regard as teething troubles in any implementation. There have been some issues with things like the technology at the leisure centres, because again, that's been new technology that we put in. But all these things are being worked upon. There is a plan for resolution of those, and in fact, we've actually secured some additional resourcing to come in and make sure that we get through those slightly quicker than we would otherwise do had we left it to internal resources. So that's ongoing at the minute.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring Karen in?
Thank you, Chair. My question is concerning actually the revenue and capital budget, and it's on page 43, and it is the staffing vacancies. I'm looking at the staffing vacancies especially from the customer and digital on page 44, the gateway, and they're mostly in shared services, and you've explained that there is the review going on. Have the vacancies been kept open on purpose till the digital strategy review was accepted and implemented?
Thank you. I think that's another item, but I'm happy to answer the question.
Yes, yeah. Well, it's all connected with
taking it. So
It does sound like my action, but
but
you're in the hot seat.
I'm more than happy to take it if the chair will allow. Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Karen, for that question. So the vacancies you refer to are the ones in customer and digital. You're right. Absolutely right. Yes, I think it was explained last week at the committee that we have been keeping some vacancies open, and that's to protect the staff that are in substantive posts while we go through the change process. The bulk of those are in customer services, not in ICT services. So there are still some vacancies in ICT services because I think there are more roles than people, more jobs than people, but you have to go through the process of making sure that everybody's had access to either their post that they want and have stated their preference for, or through redeployment if they're not successful in that. And we've got to go through that process, and that can take quite some time. We're just getting to the end of that. And once we get to the end of that, we'll know if there are any further vacancies left in ICT. I think the point I made in the previous comment I made was that what we're doing in the interim is buying resources in to make sure that actually we've got the capacity to deal with some of the issues that Councillor Cullen raised and staff are raising as well. So yeah.
Thank you.
Ken, did you have a question on self-service channels as well?
Sorry, I switched it off before. Yeah, at least 40% of service requests is the target, and Q2 only reached 25.3% via self-service channels. We've already seen a review of the online services. How user-friendly and easy will it be for customers to access our services? How will the review take place? What are the timescales? And will there hopefully be some information about residents who are unable to access online services?
Thank you very much, Councillor. So in terms of access to online services, obviously we did a big piece to review the website and make sure that all our kind of content was up to date, and that when customers come looking for information, they're able to find it easily and that it's up to date and they can trust the information that they find. So we did that piece of work. There is still further work to do to make sure that all the elements of a customer request can be processed online. So we need to move more processes towards that way of working. And that's something, again, that will be helped through the customer services review, because we'll be looking at how we can use technology to do more of the transactional processes via the website and do that in a more unified and cost-effective way. So we are going to be looking at that. And then I suppose the next challenge for us, aligned to the digital strategy, is to improve digital skills, particularly in South Ribble, so that residents feel confident going online and able to access information, complete their service requests, pay for services, whatever it may be. So we're going to be doing that work on a digital skills programme to make sure to map out the current skills provision, and then to put in place relevant initiatives, targeted pieces of work to encourage people to go online and to use the website more actively. And alongside that, we'll also be undertaking more of a communications campaign as well. So there will be some elements of communication, but also the team, the communities team and others going out into communities to show what can be done online, and also when customers come to us via the phone or into the Gateway Centre, we can say, well, did you know that you can do this online, and here's some other options and ways that you can have a look at doing it, which then means that where there are things that can easily be done online, staff in the Gateway can support those who need more assistance with more complex tasks and the more kind of challenging processes that can't always be completed online without the assistance of somebody there to help. So there's a whole range of things that will be happening to increase that ability to do things online where it's right and appropriate to do so. So yes, hopefully that gives you some confidence in the processes.
Can I come back, David? Yeah, I accept, we want to encourage all our residents to be to use the digital, but there will always be some people who won't or are unable to use digital services. And, sometimes if I'm actually ringing somebody, it's because I've either, looked at online, done things online, and I want to actually speak to someone. And so I hope that facility will be available. It's all very well pointing people, but if I've got a query and I want to speak to someone after exhausting all the other routes, I hope that will be available. And an extra question is about the booking leisure activities online. You've said, Gary, that's improved now, and hopefully we won't be seeing any trouble with that in future, hopefully.
Yeah, if I could just make a couple of points, Karen. So, I can reassure the committee that there is no intention to, in any shape or form, diminish the opportunity to call somebody and talk to them. Yes, we would prefer, and we would prefer where there are simple transactions to drive people to the website, because as Vicky says, what that does is it frees up everybody else to deal with the more complex issues, of which there are many. Hopefully that's covered that point off and reassured the committee. Just in terms of the leisure application, one of the things we have done recently, this is what people do now, is they want to do things on their phone. So that was one of the benefits of implementing the new technology. We're now able to have a leisure app, and that's been launched. And again, I'm hoping that as we move forward, those stats will improve as we start to launch apps. There's still quite a bit to do in terms of the core elements of the other services that the council provides. Unfortunately, because we're in this sharing scenario, we do have to work through all the options, because the two councils, the idea is that you have one single operating model. Okay, you can have a differential service in terms of resourcing, but it's broadly one model using one piece of technology. So we're just in the process now of analysing that and saying, well, which piece of technology is best for both councils? And then we'll redo the processes, we'll launch the app, all those kinds of things that really should drive the traffic a bit more as well.
Could I just come in with a follow-up to that? Are the days of dropping in to go swimming now over? I know we've had to deal with COVID, and opening the leisure centres has probably been a challenge. But pre-COVID, it was a case of, Dad, can we go swimming? Yeah, get your stuff, we'll bob around the corner. It's now, get Dad, can we go swimming? Well, I'll just fire up the computer and see if I can find a session for them.
As far as I'm aware, I mean, I think Mick's better. I mean, he might know better than me, but my understanding is that is available, that you can turn up. You know, the COVID restrictions are lifted, so there's no reason why that shouldn't happen now. But I'd have to check about the detail of that, about how it's working on the ground, because I don't know the answer to that question. Mick, I don't know if you know any better than I.
I think there are still some sort of
Sorry, Mick, can I just ask you to come to a microphone so that people online can hear as well?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that you can just turn up at the moment, because I think there is still some sort of restrictions there. I mean, I think what we've been speaking about, you know, prior, is that we have had some difficulties with the app and with IT that we have been working about. But to be honest with you, I mean, I don't think we're completely out of the problems relating to COVID. I mean, if you look at some of the statistics, I mean, they are quite worrying. I mean, and personally, well, I've been asking officers to look at what we can do to sort of make sure that we don't get the infection rate going out, so that we have to return to some sort of a lockdown. But if the question was, is that are the days of when you can drop in gone forever? I hope not. I hope not. But at the moment, we're still having to be sort of slightly restricted because we're not completely out of COVID yet.
Okay, thank you for that. That answers the questions. Will, I think you have a question, page 20.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just on page 20, paragraph 26, and in relation specifically about the social value portal, and the fact that staff training sessions have been delivered and a draft social value policy has been established and shared with stakeholders for input. I just wanted to know who were the stakeholders that we're liaising with, and when that draft will be available for members to look at.
Area of expertise.
Yes, I am aware of the social value policy. So I think the kind of key stakeholders were the relevant kind of teams within the council, and I know that is coming through to, if it's not already been through to Cabinet, then it's on its way through for approval or discussion and the social value policy. And it was, yes, it's been a product of work via the kind of business engagement team, the communities team, the policy and performance team, and also legal and governance. So it's been a collective effort across those stakeholders, as well as obviously procurement in leading that piece of work to develop the social value policy. So I do think that's coming forward very soon if it's not already for consideration by members.
I think it's going to be on the next Cabinet, isn't it? It's going to be on the next Cabinet. Yeah, it's on the next Cabinet.
Just come back as well, please, Chair. And just in relation to the accreditation with the living wage, which I think has got to be commended and a real step in the right direction. But have we got, as a council, a strategy in terms of filtering this out into the wider economy in South Ribble? There's been a bit in the news today about Andy Burnham getting his local business in Greater Manchester to jump on board, and I was just wondering, have we got a policy or a strategy on it? Thank you.
So as part of the community wealth building programme, there's a whole range of actions within that programme. It's over 2 years, so we're about halfway into it now. So a lot of that has been around kind of developing the groundwork for community wealth building. So putting in place the right policies, processes, structures, supporting staff to understand the concept, because it is quite a new way of thinking. And we've worked a lot with the exec member on that. Within that programme, the next phase is about now engaging more with businesses and working out with partners. So we have done some initial work with our partners around living wage accreditation. So we know that we work with a lot of what the community wealth building programme will term as anchor institutions within South Ribble. So those bigger organisations where they employ large numbers of staff, working with them, they've largely kind of signed up to living wage accreditation in a lot of cases, but there are others that we now need to bring on board, and then we can work with some of the smaller businesses through the business engagement team as well to start to demonstrate how it's possible and how it can be done. It's not always something that businesses can adopt overnight, because of their kinds of size and scale and turnover. It's something that they need to factor into future forecasting to make sure that they can afford it, but we're encouraging them and working with them, giving them the right tools and policies and processes to be able to cost that and to look at how they may build that in future. So that is something that will come as part of the next phase of rolling out the community wealth building programme.
Have you got a question on overall employment rates?
I have, Chair, thank you. But can I ask another one before I go there? Is that okay? Sorry. Just to take you back, sorry, to page 18, guys, paragraph 21. Just in relation to mental health first aid, and again, that there's some courses that have been delivered through Lancashire Mind to staff, which is definitely a step in the right direction. But in the report, it mentions in the next quarter, further awareness sessions are going to take place rather than first aid accredited training. Is that correct? Are the awareness training or are the first aid training?
So the mental health first aid training has been primarily focused on those frontline staff and teams who will have contact with community groups or communities or different stakeholders. The wider organisation will obviously have access to those mental health first aiders as the kind of key experts and the ones who should be able to put people in touch with the right sources of support and advice and provide that immediate assistance. But of course, right across the organisation, we want to have people with that awareness straight away so that they can also spot the signs of when people are experiencing mental difficulties or challenges and need that additional support. So we will be rolling out a programme of awareness raising right across staff so that they know the signs, symptoms and sources of support, including those mental health first aiders. So that programme was delivered by Lancashire Mind. It was an extensive programme. We took a lot of staff kind of through it off the job and into that training. And where possible, we would obviously look to always increase the number of people who've got mental health first aid because it comes, in handy in all areas, not just from an employment point of view and a work point of view, but those our staff often have roles in the community as well. So we would look to increase that. But I think the next immediate priority is to make sure that all staff have got that level of awareness around mental health and what it looks like within the workplace and the community.
Have we got a further strategy in terms of getting this out further into the community? Because I know that was what was discussed previously in terms of pinpointing key members of the community who could potentially, through the council resource, in terms of get that first aid training, which will then filter down hopefully further into the community.
Yes, so this was a start of this piece of work. There's obviously a lot more work to come. It was one of the first actions in the programme, so we will be working through. I think a lot of it has obviously been waiting for us to be able to get out into the community and do that work more actively. And now that we're a bit more confident that some of the restrictions are being removed, we can really go out now and start to do that mapping within the community and work with the groups and make sure that they can get access to this training. So that will follow as part of the next phase of the work.
Me again, sorry, Chair. Thank you. I'll keep quiet after this one for a bit. Page 21, paragraph 20. Overall employment rate is greater than the North West average. Are there any other better comparators to use in performance, such as similar types of authority, geography, affluence, and demographic that would help us drive that improvement? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, there are lots of different measures, Will. So the one that you would normally use to look at the trend is those claiming some form of benefit, because that will tell you for those people who are looking for work. This doesn't tell you that, but we do have access to that information. So, and inevitably, what you will see over the last few months is that rate increasing. And particularly increasing in terms of younger people. Some of which is, again, this is anecdotal, but some of which is lifestyle choices. So some individuals who choosing not to go back to work, but there's clearly an issue there. Now, what we have tomorrow is our economic summit with our partnership. So we have a joint partnership between South Ribble and Chorley, and the partners determined that actually one of the things they wanted to concentrate on as part of the COVID recovery plan was the economic impact on both communities. And we have a summit tomorrow involving lots of the key businesses in the area. And some of the partners, skills partners, etc., schools, colleges, etc., to talk about, well, how do we deal with this particular problem? And we're hoping that on the back of the event tomorrow, there'll be a set of actions, because it's, whilst we measure it, to fix it requires partnership input and particularly businesses to help with that. So again, I'm hoping that we'll get some real positive outcomes and actions from tomorrow's summit. Again, Vicky's kind of driving this, so she might have more detail.
Yeah, I was just actually looking through, because as part of the summit, we've put together a whole evidence base around employment, employability, and different workforce pressures. So we do that benchmarking continuously, looking at a whole range of measures as well. So overall employment rate is just the top metric that we look at in terms of this report, but we do have lots of information beneath that as well. And as Gary says, that's going to be one of 3 key themes that we'll be discussing with our partners tomorrow, around how we look at increasing overall employment and encouraging people into that, either through education, skills, training, volunteering opportunities, and also looking at new and emerging opportunities to increase employment as well, through various kinds of new sectors, digital, the green economy, and all the kind of supply chain opportunities that come with that as well. We want to make sure that we kind of secure those for South Ribble, so that we can give everybody that opportunity for employment. So yeah, lots of other metrics do sit around that, but yeah, the overall employment is the top one that we look at in terms of this particular report, to give us that high level overview.
Yeah, if I could just come back on that, because I am conscious that we have areas of the borough that are in the top 10% of the most affluent areas of the county. And if we are just slapping out, I'm sure we're not, but if we are just slapping ourselves on the back saying, well, aren't we good because our overall employment rate is greater than the North West average, which includes some seriously deprived areas in the inner cities, it's quite a narrow sort of parameter. And I would really like to see some more quantifiable statistics, if you like, because if we've only got 2 people unemployed and we get a job for one of them, that's a brilliant result, isn't it? But so just what is the problem? And if we could see some figures and statistics as to what challenges we actually have.
Thank you, Chair. Good point. I can see you, Councillor Mitchelson has never patted me on the back and said well done, and saying we've cracked it. He's always saying we haven't cracked it. So what I would suggest is, because we have got the summit tomorrow, I think it'd be really useful to bring the outputs and outcomes from that meeting to Scrutiny for you to have a look at, and we'll share the documents that we produced, some of which Vicky's referred to, which set the context, some of the issues in our borough. And then we'll get some of the feedback from the particular businesses and key partners, and you can scrutinise that plan.
Yeah, thank you for that. If I could bring in Councillor Sharples.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions regarding the key performance indicator, number of affordable homes delivered on page 24. Is there any further action the council could take to increase the number of affordable houses delivered? After all, new developments are being brought forward all the time and houses being constructed. And the other question really is, references made to the council pursuing its own housing developments. We're aware of the Mackenzie Arms site, but what more is planned and what timescales are involved?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sharples. Yes, so it is quite a complex one, this, in terms of delivery. What we are starting to see in South Ribble is increased house building. So you can actually, if you look around the borough or drive around the borough, you'll start to see that a lot of the sites that have previously been earmarked for development are now starting to come forward. So I do anticipate that, and we're not seeing a slowdown in development. So we know from the City Deal data that we get, actually developers are still continuing to build in this area, and there is demand for housing in this area. So I do anticipate through that route that actually we'll start to see an increase in the numbers of affordable units over a period. Depends on the build out rate, Colin, so it's always difficult to forecast that. But the key for this council is to ensure that when it's negotiating Section 106 agreements, that they are as policy compliant as possible, so that actually we max out the number of affordable units we get from any developments. And we've seen some examples of that more recently. The test track, which started at, I think, some ridiculous figure like 11%, but became policy compliant over a period. And that's what we've got to do, because that's the best and easiest source and quickest source of developing affordable housing. That said, the council does have an aspiration to deliver its own units. So you refer there to the Mackenzie Arms. There are some more coming on stream. So the extra care facility, which will be built at the side of the Civic, 72 units I think have been approved. And we're in the process now going through the procurement process for that. So that will start to come on site next year. The council will have to decide whether actually it intervenes further in the market and wants to do more, build its own more affordable units. There are some in the town deal as well, quite a number of units. I'm sure lots of members are going to go to the consultation, but there are quite a number of housing units contained in that development as well. As I said, the council will have to decide if that's sufficient and whether it wants to deliver more itself. And that'll be a debate for Policy Council and for the budget as we move forward.
Despite his assurance that he wasn't going to come back again, Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just take you to page 25, the key performance indicator at the bottom of the page there. Average days to process a new housing benefit claim. The delay in processing claims is concerning because of the effect on our most vulnerable residents, and we're seeing the potential impact of that in our review of health inequalities as well across the borough. Reference is made to review next year, but we want to know what can be done now to bring this indicator back on course. Are more resources required? Is it a question of prioritisation? What can we do now to support those residents? Thank you.
Okay. I'm waiting for you to kick me, so I answer it. So just in relation to this indicator, you're right that actually it is the people most at need that are waiting. So, and we have seen an uptick for the reasons that we previously explained in the volumes. It is quite simple, this, I think. So if members are saying that performance is not acceptable, then clearly the way to fix that is to put more resource into it. And you do that in a number of ways. You either employ your own, or you can outsource some of that stuff to the private sector, who will gladly do it for a fee. Yeah, there are issues with that. It's quite complex because of data transfers and all sorts of stuff, but that is an option. So that's something that could be looked at. That's the kind of, if members wanted something short term, that could be done. The key to this is the digitisation and the changing process, because we can demonstrate that actually you can get as low as 3.5 days through actually changing the process. Yeah, and that's part of the upgrade that Councillor Cullen talked about. So again, one of the things we're doing at the minute is upgrading this particular system so that it will actually, because the current version doesn't talk to other systems. So the updated version, and I think we're just about to sign that deal off, will enable us to talk to other systems. And lots of the data transfer is two things. It's data transfer, so that actually things come automatically into your system. So you don't wait for a piece of paper to come that takes 3 weeks in the snail mail, and then somebody punches it in. So we can do that. And then the other thing that you can do, which again has been implemented elsewhere, is the use of artificial intelligence. And for very simple transactions, because some people who are on benefits have very simple transactions. People who are generally passported, the calculation is really straightforward. Yeah, and you can free staff time up and do it much quicker if you allow the computer to do that. So if it meets a series of checks and balances, you can just pay it, and then you do a sample check on those. So there are lots of things we can do. Some of that is coming soon in the new year when we've got through the restructure, so that will happen. But if members are concerned about the current performance, that's something the exec will have to decide if they want to put some more resources into dealing with that particular issue.
Branch out. 27,500 trees planted in the borough this year. How do we monitor how many of these trees are surviving and thriving? And as the trees grow and require maintenance, is provision being made in the revenue budget to pay for it?
It's a very good question, Chair. And I think it's something that as we get into our kind of new green agenda and ways of working, how we protect and manage our assets in an environmentally sustainable way is something that we definitely need to be giving more consideration to. So as we look at our neighbourhood services and how we can make improvements, I think that longer term view around how are we building those skills into the workforce and making sure that we've got people that know how to manage trees and manage habitats in a sustainable way is going to be really important. So at the moment, I would have to go away and find out how we look at, I would guess that it's currently reports as people are out and about, as the operatives are out doing their work, they'll go and check on, recently planted trees, and we'll get reports from residents. But I think I'd have to go and ask them whether we have any processes in place. But as we go forward, it's definitely something that we need to be building into our ways of working and our training for staff to make sure that they've got that kind of environmental management way of working. So yes, it's a really good question. It's something that we'll definitely take away.
Thank you. It's a very long way of saying you don't know, but thank you.
I think I know.
But if I could add to that, because having the answers at some later date it would be welcome. I mean, some of these trees are actually not on our land. So Penwitham Bypass, for example, which was generated a question at council, is county owned and county planted trees. Now they may well be telling us that they're all thriving and doing extremely well, whereas people who are driving past them don't seem to get that impression. So it's how do we hold them to account as well as checking on trees that we've planted. But the answer to that in the future would be welcome.
David, if I could just add, I think what happened, we certainly don't count every tree. I can tell you that for nothing. So nobody's gone round and counted 27,000 trees. Well, I'll be surprised if they have. And we do wait for people to tell us stuff, admittedly. But I think that the way that we manage this, we made some assumption about those that would fail. So in effect, over a period, we'll overplant. That's how it's dealt with. To say, well, actually, we know. I think it was 20%. That was the number again that sticks in my head. That we accepted that 20% of those that are planted will fail, so we'll overplant.
No, and it is one of those things that sits with the public, and they maybe don't have the information and perhaps understand how it's done. So it would be useful to have the answers to that. So thank you. And finally,
can I just cut in, David, please?
Yeah.
Predominantly the trees that have been planted are whips, which is just like a sprig of a tree with a root on the bottom, which must take a long time for these trees to mature. So how long will it take before we actually, for example, on the Penwitham Bypass, how long will it take for these what have been planted to mature, and so that we get a benefit from it environmentally and from a looks point of view?
I'm sure that Vicky is scribbling as we speak to add that to the list of information she's going to come back to us with. If that answers the question, Colin.
Yeah, thanks.
So, Councillor Colin Sharples.
Thank you, Chair. This isn't a question, it's a request. On page 28, you're talking about the percentage of planning applications decided within 8 weeks. This improvement is most welcome, and we'd like to congratulate those involved in achieving this in difficult circumstances with home working, etc. And a request is that you would please could you pass our thanks on.
Do we have any other questions from members of committee? In which case, do we have any questions from members not on the panel, either in the room or dialing in from home? Would appear not. We may have members of the public watching this on YouTube, but they're not in the meeting, so we don't have any questions there. So if I could ask Darren to, do we have recommendations?
Thank you, Chair. Just some of the reflections from the discussion of the panel for consideration. So the panel recommends that the thanks of the panel be extended to the Chief Executive and Shared Services Lead for the report and answering the detailed questions. The panel welcomes the reassurance that the Council has robust data quality policies and procedures in place. The panel asks that future performance indicator choose more appropriate comparators which are similar to South Ribble and our borough to help make the most of benchmarking data and learning. The panel is grateful for the offer of the outcomes from the post-COVID economic summit and updated key issues paper for South Ribble. The panel expresses concern at the time taken to process new housing benefit claims and requests that the plans to improve this are expedited, including considering additional resource allocations. The panel requests that further information be provided on how the number of trees that are planted, thrive and survive, and how they're monitored and managed. And the committee asks that the planning team be congratulated for their improved performance on the percentage of planning applications decided within 8 weeks. Thank you, Chair.
Do we have any additions to those or anything people would like to remove? In which case, are those agreed? Yeah, okay, thank you. And if I could thank Gary and Vicky for coming along and answering our questions. Thank you. If we can now move on to item 6, and if I can welcome Councillor Matthew Tomlinson, the Cabinet Member for Finance, Property and Assets, and Louise Mattinson, our Director of Finance, who has got the correct name plate in front of you. I could thank Gary and Vicky. Yeah, it's a ghost in the house. I don't know where that came from. If I could start off then, how has the pandemic impacted on the council's finances, and what's the current situation with government funding in our pandemic response, please?
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I think we've all been very much aware of how it's affected us in terms of service delivery, but in terms of finance, I think we have to acknowledge that the government has done quite a good job. I think I was reading something, some analysis, for instance, of the furlough scheme and how it's protected 9 million jobs, they're now saying. And in terms of the funding that we've had, we have had lots of funding to give to our local businesses, and I think the planning team have done a really good job of getting that money out quickly. We've had cash to recompenses for the staff time we've used on various different projects related to COVID, and we've had some compensation for some of the money that we've lost to fees and charges. So it is a little bit swings and roundabouts. We didn't get quite as much as we thought we were going to get compensation for fees and charges. I'm going to give you permission to stop me if I get any of this wrong. But we have had some money over and above what we thought we would get to recompenses for staff time spent on COVID duties rather than standard council work. So we've done a lot of extra work. In the main, we've been compensated, I think, reasonably fairly for that.
You wish to add to that? No. Councillor Sharples.
Thank you, Chair. Page 32, paragraph 16 mentions a forecast surplus of 149k on the housing benefit subsidy. Could this surplus be used to speed up the processing of benefits claims mentioned in the previous item?
That's a really good question, and I'm delighted to see the Chief Exec's nodding. So maybe that's something that the panel would like us to recommend exploring at some speed.
Karen?
Thank you, Chair. My question is on page 32, paragraph 16, the final bullet point. Trade waste income is down by 16,000. Is there any reason for this? Is there a trend? And what more can be done to increase this income on a commercial activity by advertising or more competitive prices?
Yeah, I mean, and obviously we're operating in a competitive market with trade waste. You've got the big companies like Biffa, who all offer skips, and these are commercial decisions that we need to take, as the year goes ahead, whether we're competitive or not, or whether it's just that businesses haven't been as busy and are not using as much waste as they are. I wish business waste was treated a lot more like commercial, a lot more recycling, but it tends to be businesses have a skip and everything goes in there, and then we have to try and deal with it. But I think we are, as it said, down 16,000, but it comes to a commercial decision, and that's for our commercial staff to deal with.
Okay, thank you.
Will?
Thank you, Chair. On page 32, paragraph 18, on the final bullet point, there seems to be a trend of underspending on apprentices, which was understandable, obviously, during COVID. But what is the current situation with the council appointing and promoting apprenticeships?
I don't know, Will, to be honest. I accept it has been a trend, and we have been able to not use COVID, but point to all the things that we've not been able to do because of COVID. But I'll have to get back to you on that one and come back with a detailed answer. What I can say is, there's no deliberate attempt by the administration to manage those vacancies to save money. If we're not filling it, there must be a good reason, because we would want to fill it and we would want to spend the money that's available.
Thank you. It's reassuring to know that. I just think with the economic partnership meeting, which is happening tomorrow, I think that could be an opportunity for us to push apprenticeships and skills and training, with potentially being able to use that to underspend. So thank you.
Councillor Sharples.
Thanks, Chair. Still on page 32, paragraph 20 this time, final bullet point. It talks about net interest receivable and payable. What is net interest receivable and payable, and why is there an overspend?
Okay, so there is a very small amount of interest payable that's answerable, because obviously you don't have any loans outstanding, and that was on some lease agreements. So in the main, it is interest receivable on the investments that we place with various institutions. And the reason that probably overspent is not the most helpful word. We are under recovered against the interest receivable budget, and that's because the interest rates that prevail at the moment are less than those that we had budgeted for. We had anticipated slightly higher, so it's just in relation to that. It's not as high as we would otherwise have expected. Okay.
If I could come in on page 40, stock condition surveys. There is 113,000 in reserves for stock condition surveys of the council's assets. Depending on the outcome of the surveys, will the asset maintenance reserve of just 400,000 going down to 150,000 be sufficient?
We've been doing an asset review that's not quite complete yet, but the reports we've had back so far on all our 93 different buildings, I think we've got assets, is that the amount of work that we'll likely have to do is within the budget that we've already set. had a meeting with an officer last week chasing this particular thing up because the asset review's been ongoing for a while. But the anecdotal, and I have to stress it's anecdotal, response that I got was that at this stage officers were pleased with what they've been hearing. So there's nothing has come to me that gives me any worries on that.
Okay, thank you. Karen.
Thank you, Chair. My question is on page 45, paragraph 2, the revised capital programme. Is it usual for there to be so many revisions to the capital programme throughout the year, as the last one was approved by Cabinet only in September? Could you talk us through the rationale and reasoning for this, please?
I think there are some big. There are some big numbers in the revisions to the capital programme, but I don't think there's a lot of projects when you look at what we're trying to deliver. The biggest differences are things that are frankly beyond our control. There's 3.7 million of slippage. We're now projecting because of the Leyland town deal. We are intended to spend that money, but we'll spend it next year rather than this year. And really there we're being not held hostage, but we are working to a timetable that's set by the government and not us. So if things don't come forward quite as quickly as we'd hoped on that, that's due to outside influences. But to be reassured that that money will be in the budget for next year. And the other big ticket item really, 1.7 million, I think, we were intending to spend on the Mackenzie Arms project, and we discussed that at the last council meeting. Again, we're confident that that project is going to go ahead, but we're not going to spend the money quite as quickly as we thought, and so that will be in next year's capital budget rather than this year's.
Can I come back with another question, please? My question is on page 30. Just let me get it up. And it's item 11, the council's approved revenue budget for 2021-22, and it included a savings of £190,000 of staffing, 150,000 in staffing turnover. I hope those vacancies that we talked about before, Matthew, we talk about it at every meeting, don't we? That hopefully they will be filled as soon as possible. But there's £40,000 from the expansion of shared services. The £150,000 target has been achieved, but the £40,000 target has not yet been achieved. Can you give us any information on that?
I think the chief executive alluded to the next stage of shared services when he spoke, and the shared services joint committee is meeting tomorrow to consider some changes. And if those go through, the first thing you'll see is a lot of those vacancies drop off the report that always comes to this committee, because we have been holding vacancies to protect the staff that we've currently got. We don't want to fill vacancies and then do a review and find out that people have to be redeployed or moved on. So if we can manage to hold those vacancies for that period, we will do. But also if that goes through tomorrow, that'll help us achieve those targets that are stated in the report. Yes, there was a robust debate, I think, as the chief executive has described it, and we're having to have a second meeting.
Yes.
But I think that should go through tomorrow now that we've had some further reassurance, and that'll help both achieve those targets and, I say, get rid of a lot of those vacancies that we saw in Appendix 3, I think.
Appendix 4.
4, thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, and just one final question. Would you accept our thanks and pass on our thanks to everyone involved in arranging the visit to Worden Hall last Friday? I think it was very useful for the members of Scrutiny who actually attended.
Yeah, I mean, and it's only the second time I've been in since the work started. It was reassuring to see so much work had been done. And I genuinely felt like the members of the Scrutiny Committee were engaged and enjoyed the visit. And we're much more reassured to hear that at the moment we're on budget and on time with the project. And so, yeah, thank you for that. I will pass that on.
Thank you. I nearly started by saying I've only got 2 questions, but Any questions or comments from members not on the panel, either attending here or at home? No. Likewise, we don't have members of the public actually in attendance, although maybe watching on YouTube. So Darren, could you let us have recommendations?
Thank you, Chair. Just some of the reflections on the discussion. Potential recommendations could be that the panel thanks the Cabinet Member and Director of Finance for their report and answering the panel's detailed questions. The panel asks that consideration be given to the housing benefits surplus of 149,000 to be used to improve the speed of processing housing benefit claims. The panel looks forward to an update on the recruitment of apprentices and reducing the underspend there. And the panel expresses its gratitude to the Cabinet Member and staff for the site visit to Worden Hall last week. Thank you, Chair.
Anything anybody would like to add or remove? No, in which case can we agree those? Thank you. And that brings us to the end of the meeting. So thank you to all those who have attended, all those who've tuned in from home, and all those on YouTube. So goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from them.